Lien began to wonder whether she could truly stay here and be accepted. On her way home, she thought about Zhang Yi's offer. Should she discuss it with her students? When her students saw the resources she had, they were overjoyed and immediately swarmed the food like zombies. Feeling slightly relieved, Lien wanted to know how they had fared on their first day of fishing in the river. One of the students said that working at the base had been pure suffering, but now they could finally enjoy fresh air and freedom. However, no one wanted to work outside in the cold. They had only managed to catch 3 fish. Lien wasn't surprised by the outcome. The young men were dissatisfied with the meager amount of food and wanted more, but one of them, who was more rational, reminded the group that this food came from Lien, who had received it from Zhang Yi. They needed to learn to find their own food with their own hands. One of the students asked Lien if she could request permission for all of them to stay in her house. They could eat less and help with the chores if necessary. The other students insisted, if Karen and Shur could stay, why couldn't they? Lien gave them a serious look and explained that they were not like those 2 girls. Karen and Shur possessed extraordinary intellectual abilities that none of them could match. Despite hearing this, the selfish students still pressured Lien to try harder to find a way for them to leave. At that moment, Lien became certain she could not discuss Zhang Yi's offer with them just yet. 3 days later, Zhang Yi and his followers were preparing to head to the Excision base. Karen listed the necessary materials they needed to collect. After discussing their priorities, they set off toward their destination. On the way, Chunlei mentioned that the mutant cats were starting to look different, they no longer resembled the same creatures. Zhang Yi understood what he meant, though the others did not. The mutant cats had the same ability to absorb power from other mutants, making them far stronger now. Zhang Yi was eager to see these monsters in action. Not long after, Shinsen contacted Zhang Yi and asked if he had arrived at the ruins yet because she had important information to share. Zhang Yi told her to go ahead and speak. Shinsen had discovered that Tianhai City had 4 military bases scattered across different areas. Each of these bases controlled a separate region. They had been built many years ago and reinforced even further after the disaster. These bases were just as strong as the Shursan base, and all of them were underground, fully stocked with weapons and war preparations. Zhang Yi replied that at least they now knew how many bases remained in the city. Although he was aware that these bases were relatively far from their home, he couldn't be sure that they wouldn't try to expand their territory and eventually reach them. However, before Zhang Yi could dwell on the thought, Shinsen interrupted him, revealing that there was another special force outside of those 3 bases. Very little information was available about them, except that they had a large number of members. Zhang Yi thanked Shinsen for the crucial intel, which pleased her. She assured him that she would continue to gather more information for him. For Zhang Yi, this was exactly what he had hoped for. After the death of 90% of Tianhai's population, there should have been more than enough resources left for the remaining 10%. Because of that, he was confident that there wouldn't be any conflicts over exploiting the city's food supplies. Even though the future was uncertain, his uncle knew that the worst-case scenario always had a way of happening. Still, Zhang Yi was sure that no matter which group they encountered, the 4 people in his vehicle could obliterate any army. Arrival at Shushan base. Upon reaching the Shushan base, they rushed toward their target. Near the base, 2 different groups were arguing. It was clear that they belonged to separate bases, as they were in the middle of a heated dispute. They agreed on one thing, however: the entrance to the base was completely blocked. They hadn't expected Chenyuan to provoke the neighboring city and end up getting destroyed by missiles. One of the leaders commented that Chenyuan had always been too arrogant, and in the end, that arrogance had led to its downfall. A group led by a red-haired man seemed frustrated. Their journey had been in vain since they couldn't enter the base. Clearing all the rubble blocking the entrance would require immense effort, and they simply weren't capable of doing it now. However, one of the base leaders was confident there had to be a massive amount of resources left inside, and they would undoubtedly be valuable to them. The red-haired man stated that they could use mutant abilities to clear the path, but how would they transport all the materials back to their base? Their base was located 200 kilometers away from here. When asked if they could transport the resources, the red-haired man replied that they were in the same situation. He had only come here to assess the condition of Shushan base, and realizing that everyone inside was already dead was the best news for him. Even if they couldn't take the resources, they were now competing to claim control over the area. Zhang Yi and his team watched from a distance. His uncle quickly recognized that these people must be from the other bases Shinsen had mentioned earlier. Zhang Yi instructed his team to follow him and remain silent. Then, Zhang Yi approached the 2 groups. The emblem on his uniform came from a fake Shursan base uniform, crafted by Karen. The people here believed that everyone from Shursan base was dead, so they were shocked to see him. The red-haired man immediately declared that he was only there to gather information. Since he had already obtained what he needed, he would be leaving soon. In his mind, the representative of King Chang Base believed that there was no point in engaging in a conflict over something they couldn't even take. However, unlike the first group, the representative from Choyu Base was more aggressive. He argued that he did not believe Zhang Yi's team were actual survivors from Shirshan Base. Zhang Yi, on the other hand, ignored the accusation and simply ordered those who had gathered the information they needed to return to their territories. He and his team had no intention of starting a conflict. But suddenly, the man shouted for them to wait. He declared that they didn't understand the situation. The soldier beside him was a powerful mutant and would be the new ruler of this place. Chun was shocked to see another mutant. The soldier displayed his strength, stating that he was used to crushing enemies like ants. After issuing this threat and demonstration of absolute power, he was confident that they wouldn't dare fight back. Zhang Yi calmly stated that he had no intention of causing trouble, but since it was now unavoidable, he decided to reveal the true extent of his power. Suddenly, the mutant fire leader's head was sent flying, and the mutant cat instantly grew larger, devouring 2 nearby soldiers in a flash. However, the cat immediately spat them out, finding their taste disgusting. It didn't eat trash. Zhang Yi attempted to absorb the soldier's power, but it turned out that he was merely a newly awakened mutant, far too weak to increase Zhang Yi's strength. Chun then remarked that these arrogant young men always thought they were invincible as soon as they discovered their abilities. After storing the bodies, Zhang Yi noted that Choyu Base had never faced a real battle, and its members were far too weak. Entering Shirshan Base. They then proceeded to enter Shirshan Base to complete their mission. Using the incredible power of his dimensional space, Zhang Yi cleared the corridors so they could enter. There seemed to be no immediate danger, so the mutant cat took the lead. The first room they entered was in complete chaos. They reached the first gate, and Chun suddenly mentioned that he could feel an eerie chill in this place. Zhang Yi reassured him, saying, "There's nothing to fear, neither the living nor the dead." They continued deeper into the base until they arrived at a door labeled Armory. When they opened it, they were shocked. Inside, the room contained the most powerful military equipment imaginable, including helicopters and RPG missiles. Zhang Yi declared that this must have been the weapons depot for the entire city, and it had existed long before the apocalypse. In Chun's eyes, these weapons were useless in a world covered in snow and ice. However, Zhang Yi countered that if these weapons were truly useless, Ling Feng would not have used them to attack their home. But his real goal was to use the weapons from the vehicles. His uncle's eyes lit up with interest as he examined the weapons. Zhang Yi collected everything into his storage space, it seemed to be limitless. He then told his uncle to pick what he wanted, reminding him that these weapons were for defense, not for playing around. Exploring further. Moving to another area, they found the path blocked by rubble. Zhang Yi's uncle used his abilities to clear the way. As they continued, they discovered computers and servers belonging to the base. Zhang Yi stated that these computers might contain useful data for Shinsen, so he stored them away. Chunlei, who had been cautious, was suddenly startled by cockroaches crawling from the debris. Zhang Yi smirked and explained that this place was likely used to create protein for the workers. Even though it was a horrifying realization, Zhang Yi mocked Chun for being scared like a woman. Observing the equipment used to convert people into food, Zhang Yi wondered if he should bring it back to Karen. Even though he found it cruel, he understood that everything had its use, so he decided to take it along. They continued walking through various locations inside the underground base. After some time, the mutant cat began to feel uneasy. They didn't know where the potential threat was coming from, but Zhang Yi had a strange feeling, as if they were being watched from the shadows. The warehouse. After some time, they arrived at a warehouse. The door was so strong that even Pamanu, using his full strength, could not break it down. Zhang Yi stepped forward and attempted to open it the traditional way. He reminded the others not to underestimate technology just because they had superpowers. Then, Zhang Yi signaled for Pamanu to proceed. After a great deal of effort, they finally managed to open the warehouse door. Inside was a massive hall filled with dozens of crates, immediately drawing their attention. Pamanu pointed toward a curtain at the far end of the room. When they pulled it aside, they discovered resources that initially seemed unremarkable. However, Zhang Yi was confident that Ken could use them to build something useful. With a smirk, he stole everything. The storage room. Another room nearby caught Zhang Yi's attention. Inside, they found a stockpile of food that the base had gathered from their various missions. Pamanu thought that Zhang Yi should take most of it, as it was too much for them to eat alone. Zhang Yi laughed and said, "I already have enough food to last a lifetime, and I will always share with my allies." After looting everything they needed, they sealed off the base entrance. Besides using heavy stones, which Chunlei reinforced, he also piled up snow and created an ice barrier. Then, they headed home in their vehicle. Back at home. Once they arrived home, Zhang Yi found out that Lien had gone for his martial arts training session with him. However, he had not yet returned from his mission. Zuokir informed him about this and relayed a message from Zhang Yi himself, to cancel today's lesson. Lien was shocked to hear this. He knew that this meant he would return empty-handed, without food for his hungry students. Zuokir then asked if Lien was hungry. Although Lien was starving, he refused to eat and decided to come back tomorrow instead. Zuokir felt bad that Lien had come all this way for nothing. But Lien reassured him, saying, "Don't worry. The class schedule is set by the students." Then, the young woman left in embarrassment. Just then, Shinsen appeared and commented, "This must be the way of martial artists." Zuokir sighed and remarked that Lien should have at least taken food for himself. However, Shinsen firmly disagreed, saying, "That would have been even worse for Lien." Lien's former students were selfish and unworthy, constantly fighting over small portions of food. That was why Lien chose not to bring them anything. Zuokir then wondered, did Zhang Yi do this on purpose? Did he intentionally forget to inform Lien that he would be away, making him come here expecting to bring food to his students, only to return empty-handed? Did he do it so that Lien would finally realize the truth about his students? The crazy girl in the wheelchair immediately agreed, saying, "That's exactly what happened. Zhang Yi is amazing for coming up with such a brilliant plan." Shin was fascinated by Zhang Yi's cunning, while Zuokir simply nodded in agreement, saying that this was exactly something her fiancé would do. Lien's realization. On the way home, Zhang Yi suddenly remembered that he had forgotten to tell Lien he would be gone today. Meanwhile, when Lien returned to the village, he noticed the villagers working hard. Even the children were helping. This made him think about his own martial arts students, who simply sat around, waiting for him to bring them food. At that moment, he was impressed by the villagers and realized Zhang Yi had been right. Letting his students fend for themselves, even a little, was necessary. When he returned to his students, they immediately ran toward him, asking, "Where's today's food?" Lien replied, "Zhang Yi isn't home, so there's no food today. You'll have to go out and catch fish." The students grumbled in frustration, shouting, "If Zhang Yi isn't home, he should at least leave some food for us." Lien wanted them to stop blaming others and start finding their own food. But they argued back. "We're not fishermen. Our hands are injured." Another student complained. "This is all because of Shinsen and Karen. They were our classmates for years, and now they live comfortably while ignoring us." Soon, everyone agreed that the girls had always been the real villains. Lien was shocked by their accusations. These were the same girls who had nearly died because of them, and yet they were still being blamed. He became furious as he listened to their selfish remarks. Finally, he shouted at them to be quiet. He had an announcement to make. "The decision," Lien declared. "From now on, I will live in the bunker with Ken and Shinli." He had decided that he could no longer spoil these people. The students cheered, thinking this meant he would take them with him. But Lien quickly shattered their hopes. This was not what they thought. They would all stay here and learn to survive on their own. Zhang Yi had promised to provide food for 10 people daily, but only for martial arts training. Lien would personally deliver this food to them, but that was all. Even though Lien knew he was giving up his own food, his ungrateful students still rebelled, refusing to accept the situation. They even called him selfish for making this decision. Lien, however, was done listening to his spoiled students. Ignoring their protests, he turned away and walked toward his new home.